516-621-2288. 516-621-2288. 867-5309. 516-621-2288.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, I was trying to reach you. I was calling. I was trying to reach you.
Yeah, but that's my telephone number. That's not who I am. I mean, when normally people speak to me, they don't call me by my number. You can call me Alan. You can call me Alan Lucas. You can even call me Rabbi. By the way, if you're going to use numbers, at least use my cell phone or my home number. Don't use my office number. We don't like to be known as numbers. We Jews are not comfortable with being called numbers. In fact, this is our last TBS tube for the year. I hope you've had as much fun watching it as we have in making them. But each time we're trying to teach something that you're studying as part of your Shabbat program. And this one is no different. It'll be the last one, but don't worry. We'll do more for next year. But you've started studying Bamidbar, the book of the Bible that goes in Hebrew by the name Bamidbar, which literally means in the wilderness. But in English, it's known as the book of Numbers. And the reason that it's called the book of Numbers is because, as you know now, the early chapters deal with the census that was taken of the children of Israel while they were in the wilderness. And we Jews do not like to count people as numbers. Even when we do a minyan, and you'll come, and we need a quorum of 10 to get started, we don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, because that would be treating an individual as a number. We don't like doing that. So what we do is we'll say sometimes either not 1 or not 2 to understand that they're not a number. Or sometimes we'll use a verse from the Torah. And each person, Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha, each person becomes a word from the Torah. Anything but treating them as a number. People are not numbers. We're so much more than that. And there is also a beautiful connection between the book of Bamidbar that you've begun studying and the holiday of Shavuot that is coming up next week. Shavuot is also known as Chag HaBikurim, the holiday of the first fruits. And one of the beautiful parts of the observance was the idea that you would bring your first fruits when we were in the land to the temple in Jerusalem, and it would become literally a paradise, overflowing with the first fruits that were the blessing of the land. And the rabbis connect Bamidbar and Shavuot, the wilderness, to paradise by saying, how do we transform something from being a wilderness into being a paradise lush with fruits and beautiful foods? And the answer is Torah. That the Torah and the mitzvot that you've been studying with your teachers every Shabbat, the values that this teaches us, the things that we learn from our sacred Jewish tradition are what help us transform a world that has a potential of being a wilderness into a world that has a potential of being a paradise, a beautiful and wonderful place. And that's what you've been learning every Shabbat. So I want to end with a story, a couple of questions, and then we'll say Shabbat Shalom. The story is about a Rabbi Isser Zalman Meltzer, who was the dean of the Eitz Chaim Yeshiva in Jerusalem. And one particularly cold, blustery day, he was walking home from the yeshiva after a long day of study, and he came to his home. His nephew, Reb David Finkel, was accompanying him, as he always does. He shouldn't have to walk alone. And he got to his home, and his entrance was on the second floor, and he was a little older, and he was schlepping up the 2 flights of steps, and his nephew waited down on the street for him. And just as his uncle was about to enter the apartment, he saw him pause before the door. He wandered back and forth a little bit on the porch, and then he began the slow descent back to the street. "Uncle, did you forget something? What's the matter?" He says, No. And he began to walk a little, about 5-10 minutes. "It's cold out here. Can I help you?" No, everything's okay. And after about 10-15 minutes, the poor uncle schlepped back up the 2 flights of stairs. And just as he was about to take the door and enter, again he paused. Again he turned around, waited for a minute, and then descended the steps again. And finally the nephew says, "What's the matter, Uncle? Why won't you go into the apartment? Did you lose something? Did you forget something?" And it was only at that point when the uncle realized that he was going to have to give some explanation for his bizarre behavior, that he told his nephew, he says, "Look," he says, "we have a young woman who cleans the house for us. She was washing the floor in the kitchen. I was just about to enter, and I heard her singing. No doubt she sings to help make her difficult work easier. And I knew that the minute I would walk in, she would be embarrassed that I caught her singing, and she would stop. And by stopping this, her work would become more difficult. And I didn't want her day to become harder than it already was. So I figured I would wait till she was finished, and then I would go in. And each time I came back, she was still singing. Her work was not yet done. And what a beautiful that story is, I believe, because what it tells about is how our Judaism, our study of the Torah that he'd been doing all day in the yeshiva, should bring you to a sensitivity for other people. An awareness that we live in a world where everybody should be singing. This should be a paradise. And can we do something to make the world a better place, an easier place for everybody that we meet, even the person who washes the floor? That's the challenge of your religious school education. That's the challenge of what you've been doing every Shabbat. So here's some questions that I'd like you to consider, and we'll talk about them when we get together. Over this course of year and this program, how have you grown? Have you seen any progress between what you knew and who you were, and the kind of person that you're becoming? You studied in this parsha about Moshe and Aaron, special people who want to be known by their names, not by just a number. And the question is, what makes you special? What makes you a Moshe, an Aaron, a Steve, or a Susie? What is it about you that makes you special? That when your friends see you coming, they say, this is someone that helps make this world less of a desert and a little more of a paradise. Why do they like you? Why do they want to be with you? What is it about your family that makes your family special? Do you look at your family? Do you think people look at your family and when they see you're coming, they understand that there's more joy in the world because you're there? How do you want to be counted? Not as a number, but as a certain kind of a person that transforms a world from a wilderness into a paradise. That's the way I want to be counted. We hope that's the way you want to be counted as well. Shabbat Shalom.